Thank you, everybody, for attending today's CD Foundation online meetup. We have a very interesting presenter today, Guru Mani. He is the Director of Devops and Quality Engineering at Markel Insurance. He's going to have some very strong insights in terms of what's needed from the perspective of FinTech. And he's really going to talk about people and process today. I think we oftentimes forget how important that is in our journey in DevOps and learning more about DevOps, and we get focused on the tools. So I tried to kind of coordinate these meetups with both the human factor, cultural factors, as well as tools factors. Now, as we know, last month we did Argo CD. So this month we're doing butter knives practitioners to ninja warriors, transforming your IT workforce towards a DevOps mentality. Just a few housekeeping things. As people are coming on, I am allowing you to talk, so you might want to keep yourself muted, but you can raise your hand or just speak out and say, I have a question at any time. It is totally okay. And on that note, I will pass it over to Guru.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone, for your time as well. I'm hoping for this conversation to be a very philosophical and a mind-opening talk for us DevOps engineers and developers at heart. Before I move forward, I wanted to actually call out a big shout out to Tracy and folks from the Deploy Hub. You guys are amazing and doing a lot of cutting edge stuff, and the industry needs more of this. So keep doing what you all are doing, because we are here to all learn and soak it from you all and improve ourselves. So a couple of months back, I think I had a talk and wanted to actually share an idea of this butter knife practitioners to ninja warriors. It literally is a foundation key towards transforming some of your IT workforce as you think about digital transformation into a DevOps mentality. And DevOps as a pattern itself has taken such a buzzword in the last couple of years, and every industry and every domain and every organization in the Fortune 500 as well as startups want to drink that Kool-Aid. So this today is a reflection of the lessons learned and the continuous lessons we are learning. So without further ado, I'll just quickly move forward. Opening note on how we want to interact. I'm open to having an interactive session, so just stop me and we can go through questions if as I go through the content. I'll go into a quick glimpse about me and my dojos is what I'm going to actually introduce as a first concept, which is a learning area. From the martial arts terminology, it refers to a place where you learn and you're there to learn and improve. And my learning experiences and circling back to the topic of today, which is how do we overcome the people and the practices, cultural mentality over as the technology rapidly challenges us to keep thinking ahead and wanting to move towards continuous deployments with all these newer tools and cloud native patterns that are coming out. And I'm going to draw on some recipes that I have had the opportunity to reflect back. And basically say these were some recipes that have immensely helped my team, myself, improve some culture and the turnkey of people from one state to the other and improving the DevOps performance. And I'm going to reflect on that and some anti-patterns and lessons learned. So I'll quickly go into me, myself, and career in a show, sort of a conversation. It's very simple. I am a very simple person in terms of not having too much on my personal side. You'll see that I have been practicing martial arts for about 13 years now. I have yet not become a sensei yet or a black belt. I'm a brown belt working towards getting my black belt soon. I play a lot of tennis. And I have been playing tennis since I was 5. I play really good, and I also host a large league here in Richmond that has over 350 participants each summer and spring. So I really love the game, and I also run a spring league. If you are all in the Richmond area and want to play some tennis, just give me a text. I also love hiking and the beach, which is why I thought I'll put a small picture. That is not my family, but I do have a wife and 2 children, girls, Jill, Ariana, and Shyla. And on the right-hand side, I started to actually put out a diagram of, for the Kung perspective, martial arts with the hard and soft styles, test-driven development has really carried me a lot in the last decade in terms of improving from where I am. I've had a lot of consulting opportunities given all the way from state and federal agencies to Capital One and recently with Markel. And I've also been a part of some defense and federal projects as well along my career. So I thought of actually reflecting my journey in terms of just a martial arts practitioner going from a white belt to green belt, brown belt, and then finally to black belt. And I started categorizing my own improvement in the tech industry, and I laid out what I was able to accomplish and learn from my career itself. Started off as a software engineer and a networking engineer at a firm in DC. Did a lot of software development and network testing, network automation, setting those up through code. Moved on to quality and configuration management and engineering. I started my forte into test-driven development, got a lot of passion in behavioral-driven development, and drank that Kool-Aid really well to a point where I worked with a couple of state agencies to completely transform their software testing practices to be a behavioral-driven development way, so that we could have specification-driven domain development and be able to have a common fabric of English on top of all of the features that come out. Lean engineering was something I was introduced through part of a small team that I worked with for the NHTSA, National Highway Transportation Safety Authority, in conjunction with the Department of Motor Vehicle, and we were a team of 10, learned a ton from all those great software developers and engineers. And then 15 to 20, I started moving out from hands-on keyboard to be more of an enterprise transformation, large divisional changes from older practices through to agile DevOps mentality, getting started with everything as code and infrastructure as code, configuration as code, into GitOps a bit, and I went through a lot of data ops engineering for deployments of databases and large-scale transactional systems that are heavily manual, and got my forte into that. And I started putting the slide through. I realized that a typical brown belt at that point, before they get a mastery towards the black belt, you sort of get this epiphany. Maybe it was just timing that my epiphany on the IT industry and the martial arts sort of kind of blended together. So today I'm here humbled by the fact that I am actually improving in my IT career and my journey solely through learning by teaching and teaching by learning. Today it's a reflection of the aha moments that I have gotten through the work I've done with all of these agencies and organizations. So my dojo's at a glance. My learning petri dishes is what I call it. Several years I was part of the DMV, NHTSA Shreds project. It landed itself in the White House for a presidential award to transform a largely monolithic mainframe-based systems that were manual processes all over to a fully automated, deployed, modern stack with data intelligence, transactional systems, 360, 24/7 uptimes, scalability, the full caboodle, and we ended up taking Virginia from rank 48 to 2. Learned a lot from that team. And then I briefly had an opportunity to, a consultant contract with Capital One. I was involved in an enablement move in Virginia tax for a transformation into digital practices in Devops. And the last 3 years I have been with Markel. I joined Markel in August 2017 to lead the configuration management practices and quality engineering. And within 2 years, I was also given the opportunity to lead DevOps practices in Markel. So I wanted to actually cut to the chase and provide some great work that my team has actually managed to move the needle in terms of DevOps practices within Markel. I skipped a lot of what happened in the other organizations and wanted to just give a little glimpse of this. When I started Markel, we were largely build, test, deploy all segregated out, mostly manual. Builds were automated, testing and deployments were not. Monitoring was again through ticketing systems, like we love through ServiceNow, and to get your site reliability matrices. All of that fun goodies were all part of the initial assessment of where Markel started. And this particular slide is an excerpt from one of the senior leadership call out that I did earlier this year on the progress made from a Devops perspective. And you'll see that we, as a team, partnered with so many app dev teams in Markel, North America and international, and moved them from a count of builds and deploys that were in the low hundreds to the thousands. I'm not going to read through these. The bigger call out was also integrating quality engineering matrices and reliability into these deployment patterns. And we managed to actually year around year increase the overall usage of your test pipelines and deployment pipelines within your builds to grow up skyrocketingly a higher level. And we did not achieve this as just a small team. It was an entire enterprise effort. And I'm going to move slowly into how culturally we were able to achieve that success. My team today manages 725 Git repositories that are scattered around 100 or so active projects that are under build, test, deploy. Many, or if not most of them, are SOX controlled applications for the fintech industry. And we also maintain Jira and Confluence integrations with about 496 active projects that are aiding in the agile transformation. So this is a little view of the growth that we were able to do partnering with so many app dev teams. The names on these slides through the journey from 2018 through to 20, you get to see policy upload. There are so many terminologies up there that talk about how many build increases that the team was able to work together with the app dev teams and increase. We have forms automation, E2, property, ghost draft. All these names are internal SOX compliant applications and platforms that support our insurance industry. Markel insures a lot of specialty products. We are not your mainstream home and health insurance. We insure resources, hospitals, general liability, cyber. If you have $1 million, shoe that you want to insure, we do that. Race cars and antique cars. So these application sets that I'm talking about are all very unique in terms of their ability to rate, quote, and bind niche products for our business users. You'll also see how between the builds, tests, and deploys, there are slight nuances in how these app dev teams improved in their maturity. And it's, again, a true reflection of a bottom-up organic growth where your builds start to increase skyrocketingly high. You start to get a funnel where your tests and deployments and reliability on your deployment starts to decrease, and you carefully then start to move the needle up on your tests and deployment practices. We are not there in the end. We are still here today, 2.5 years into this journey, actively bringing a lot of these practices maturity up, increasing the deployment frequency, increasing the reliability of deployments, increasing the presence of automated software tests within each of these builds and deploy pipelines. And finally, wanted to move into the technology piece of the puzzle. And when I started to put this slide together, I actually did not imagine this would kind of sort of look like a train engine, which I did not have the insight to actually create that. But you'll see on top, let me explain what I wanted to actually put together. Right from the left through to the right, this explosion of tools happened in an incremental way from 2018 through 2019. We were largely a .NET framework and .NET Core shop. We have embraced open source in the last year and a half, and you'll see that our Java, Angular, Ruby, Python, Node.js, JavaScript, Vue.js presence is starting to increase with recently Go being added. We are still in the midst of consolidating some tools for the builds and deploys, and on top you'll see a conglomeration of a lot of tools that my team manages, operates, and also integrates to provide a value stream for app dev teams in Markel. And recently we moved from VMware private cloud to using Microsoft Azure, and we have gotten an explosion of the infrastructure as code and modern deployment and management tools such as Kubernetes, Terraform, and Helm actually coming into the mix. On the continuous testing data and monitoring side, explosions there as well in so many different transactional systems. So that just gives a view of our 2.5-year journey into a fintech company as a central DevOps team. On the bottom, we started off in mid-2018 asking for a $1.2 million funding to create a central team that would then enable others in Markel. And I had the opportunity to work with 4 solutions architects, consider them to be the best, and also another DevOps team that today is all one team together of 14 people. Organically saw our central team's growth from a $1.2 million yearly program to a $2.3 million program today, mostly encompassing a few solutions architect and 60% junior engineers out of college that we hire, train, and then bring them into a DevOps mentality to then help the app dev teams. The circles with the people on there is talking about our move in learning and teaching by way of floating out webinars, Center for Excellences, Center for Enablements throughout the program inception through to today. To give a slight overview, in 2018, we started off with 2 Center of Enablement sessions, largely to bring other app dev teams into awareness of what's going on, how they could actually leverage and partner with us, and how we could all help each other collectively improve in our DevOps maturity. That blossomed out to be a very cohesive program with every once in 2 weeks a presentation talk, every month a webinar and a COE talk, and we saw the growth of our partnership with app dev teams start to explode. We are a fintech company that also has a lot of vendor management in-house. Namely few, we have Accenture, IBM, Infosys, TCS. We have a lot of these vendor partners who help us in bringing IT to the business. I've missed a lot of names, but we have a ton of our vendors who help with the associates in-house as well in transforming our IT culture over. We are about 30% associates and 70% vendor managed, and we are pendulum shifting that from that percentage to be more of an associate-driven development with vendors brought in to help with niche projects. So the last segment of the picture there is to call out the explosion in the participation and the explosion in the partnerships that we have had, specifically this year, in continuing to do this practice. People have reached out and we have formed a very good network of connection between all of the app dev teams. And we are starting to see them support and also contribute to the same cause of this mission of bringing DevOps maturity up.
Guru,
Yep.
were the app dev teams receptive to what you're doing? Or were they resistant?
Very good question. So to avoid the aspect of resistance initially, we started off organically from a bottom-up approach. Purely for 6 to 8 months, we said this would be a bottom-up approach where we showcase specific features and tools to help the app dev team. We brought 2 teams in the mix and showed them how .NET Core and Framework could be built and deployed. That caused an interest in them. They said, hey, could we work together? Floated out that feature. They were happy. Soon they were starting to, go into Jenkins and writing some stage and steps in their deployments. That allowed us to then expand to another team. That journey went through, and we went to the route of shared libraries. We went for a year creating a gigabyte of shared library repositories. And there were teams that did give resistance. but largely they were overcome by the culture of wanting to help and providing a workable solution back to that team versus actually asking that team to do it as a practice. So the first 8 months barriers to penetrating those pushbacks were us having to actually show them the practice, do it for them and helping them out, which created a sense of trust. Today, we still have a large mix of teams that do their own, but we are trying to reach and work with them. But majority of the teams are starting to work in cohesiveness, and that force multiplication is starting to show up. Good question. Any other questions before I move on? I'll pause here for a bit. Yeah, so the problem we faced, and I'll stop for a bit to highlight a technology problem that we faced before I move into the recipes of success. Obviously, these tools are all just an icon on this PowerPoint, but behind them comes with complexity of integrating them, complexity of maintaining them up and running, as well as providing a conduit for teams to actually safely build, test, and deploy their software out to production. About a year into that exercise, we got burnt, to be quite honest, as a lesson learned, because we started to become more of a configuration management integrator code base creators and maintainers for Markel. And we didn't have a lot of bite or response or contributions from the other side. And to overcome that, we really started to take a mind shift and a mentality approach of going into the challenge through teaching. And that has actually helped us a lot in scaling from 2019 mid summer through to 2020, end of 2020. And I'm going to reflect some of those recipes in the next set of slides. So our crux of the discussion today, I mean, that tooling there and the increases in the practices are one thing as an outcome, but what they don't shed behind the curtains is what actually fostered that culture and what actually fostered that growth. And I wanted to draw some parallels between the martial arts that I'm practicing every day to the IT industry. And actually, thanks to Tracy for putting the Ninja Warrior image here. I wanted to actually talk about how do you take a white belt person who wants to learn martial arts as an art purely, with an analogy given to software development, and how do you ensure that that martial artist succeeds in transforming themselves and learning to become a ninja warrior or a sensei who can actually use instruments or tools and be very proficient in that and continue their journey of learning. And it's not easy said or done, and it's not that we have mastered it. We are here with still so much to learn, and I can't say we have conquered the problem for sure. But key 3 recipes that I wanted to call out was something that has stayed in my mind through my sensei who has taught me for a while, and that is the first one. So I'll go into this, and I'm going to assume that the audience largely has fairly minimal knowledge of terminologies from the martial arts. So there is a terminology called Taikiyoku or Taiji. I mean, I think it's the crux of the whole thing is it is an abstracted principle or a simplified principles of the complex principles and patterns that you want to imbibe in your daily work and your daily efforts. In the martial arts world, they call this particular event as a first cause, and this is something that you get trained on every class and is also tested as the first thing in a black belt. And if your first cause is a failure, they typically ask you to go back to the drawing board and get more maturity on it. So let me talk about the first cause. It's a Kada in a sense that includes every movement that are simplified and abstracted, and it actually is something that you want to repeat over and over as a pattern and a technique. And if I were to draw that to the Devops world, everything from source control management, configuration management, continuous integration, deployments, testing, and monitoring are all simplified principles that you one would have to actually keep on practicing. And these foundation patterns or techniques are the ones that you want to keep in your daily life, whether you're a product owner or an analyst or an engineer in a Scrum team, or you're a central team that is maintaining and managing and operating a large stack for a large safe division. It's the same. You want to actually enable, and you want to foster, and you want to shout out from the top of the mountain for teams to do these patterns and techniques every day. And saying it is one thing, but then doing it is completely another. And I'll go to the next recipe on how to actually get that going. So strengthening of our core practices eventually leads to a stronger culture. And it takes time to strengthen that core practice. And leaders, as leaders, I have a hidden goal to basically give that time back to the team, my own team, as well as app dev teams, to get to a certain level of that core practice strengthening before counting or before saying kumbaya to the success songs of how builds and deploys became higher and things like that. Because if you want to truly change the culture, these practices are the ones that would build on that healthy cultural outcomes. So recipe number 2, this is something that I still work today with my teams. And we practice this very diligently on a sprint by sprint, week by week basis to come back and then clean up our Kadas. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people probably would know the terminology Kada from martial arts. They are specific practice routines that have been orchestrated in a way that would allow for you to repeat. And as you repeat them, these routines become your some things that your app dev teams would do on their sleep, or would become a mastery over time, and it becomes part of your day-to-day work and daily job. But just practicing those routines, saying, hey, everybody has to be doing at least one check-in or one build a day, doesn't mean that you're going to get there. You want to also have a recipe of performing and evaluating and assessing where you stand and where your team stands and where your division stands on a weekly basis, daily basis, because that's important as well. So that particular evaluation on the martial arts calls for, have you performed Kada 1, Kada 2, and it goes on and builds on to a point where you go into advanced patterns and practices such as PNANs and stuff. If I were to take that onto the DevOps world, before a person starts to go gung-ho into how do I do modern microservices deployment, there is some level of maturity and growth and respect to the knowledge of fundamental foundations such as configuration management, fundamental practices such as functions and infrastructure as code, and these patterns have to be at a stable level and maturity before you can start to see your measured growth and measured stage improvement in your DevOps journey. Everyday cycles are important. So as leaders, as well as team members of each team, you want to give yourself the time to do that on an everyday basis. And if you do this on an everyday basis, your techniques refines, and finally your art refines. I reflect back on 2018 December, where the DevOps team that I'm part of and leading, we had about maybe 10 or 12 builds in 3 or 4 days. New team, a lot of new folks coming in. They were looking at how to work with each other and so on and so forth. And if I look at what has happened today, we pump out at least 3 or 4 code builds every once in 2 hours. At least there are a couple of change requests going out to your production, and that did not happen magically or by hiring just a few folks and saying thou shall do it. It comes with everyday cycles of having time to practice those forms and giving the time to reflect back on it and refine it. Recipe number 3. Now, this is something that is more on the philosophical lines. A couple of martial arts disciplines do this. They say that before you get to a mastery in an art level, you have to cross the bridge of a senpai. So let's take an example of this, and I'll go into what the definition of Senpai and OK in this context is. So you got a DevOps team, you've invested, you've got the buy-in from the top down or your leaders, you start a team, you're ready to influence, all of that is going through, and you have a lot of engineers in maybe a central DevOps team or your app dev team that practices pretty well, and they're pretty good in the art of software development. What happens is to transform a large organization that has 2,000 IT resources that contribute to your business is just from a mastery of one person having that or a team having that doesn't call for the entire company going in that direction. So we want to actually look at how these masters, as they become artists, give time to contribute back by way of teaching. And I'll give you an example of that. 3.5 months into our tenureship in Markel, and we got a stable platform with our build, test, deploy, we said, let's start doing COEs and C4Es and weekly dojo sessions with app dev teams. Partly not to teach them how DevOps is done, partly to learn how they do app dev cycles and to learn from them. And as we were teaching DevOps practices and how to actually bolt on automation to the app dev community, we learned a ton. And we started to go, wow, this team has .NET Core, which is very different from a .NET framework. Team B now is different. Team C now has a Java application. Team 4 has a Python application. Team 5 that we interface is NPM, and it's all node-based stack. Our learning started to foster by way of us starting to go teach simple foundational techniques. And it actually truly came back and reflected on how the team, the DevOps team in Markel, went from one programming language or a couple of programming language and tools and techniques to be truly a polyglot engineering team 2.5 years into the journey. And without this role of a senpai, who the definition of senpai is a person who actually receives or actually provides information, and a uke is a person who participates in receiving that information, and together they form a cohesive bond in learning from each other and in teaching and improving as two people. And quite often I have seen this role of Senpai UK be demonstrated with your Center for Enablement Techniques and saying, hey, there should be a mentor, agile coaches, DevOps mentors and things like that. But they're all largely bucketed under that Senpai UK category, where you want to actually think about having these mentors play a key critical role of teaching and also learning and bringing it back for self-reflection, which then leads to a continuous improvement journey. In the martial arts world, without this cycle being demonstrated with success, they do not allow, certain arts do not allow that brown belt to go from a senpai stage to a sensei, which is a black belt. And I think I would agree with that. Getting that epiphany from that artist, that art to the IT industry. So I'll stop right there and talk about the crux. Any questions so far on the 3 recipes that I have gone through?
This is Tracy. I do have one. How, we talk about failing fast. Mm-hmm. And what I have seen is that you have to have management support that failing. We don't want to think about failing, but as you very well know, and I do have a black belt, so this is fun. You end up on the mat a lot, kind of on your face, and that's the way we learn. How did upper management support that process when your team might have been on the ground?
Very good question. Yeah. So to truly show by example to the upper management on letting people fail fast and recover, and that is part of the learning journey, is to actually demonstrate that within a particular team and showcase that it has given benefits to that team. So I'm of a person who lets my team fall 100 times as long as it doesn't hurt the bone, and that person's out for 3 months or out of the whole game. That's a different story. But simple things that you do you want to actually foster a culture of safety. And if the person falls down, if there is an example of bringing them back up, helping them get back up on their feet, and letting them repeat that technique again, and they don't fall again, or if they learn from their mistakes before and they're moving forward, that culture of safety needs to come from at least one team, one leader, and that needs to permeate across the board. Just going into top management and to the C-level executives and saying, we got to foster a culture of learning several times and by falling, and we have to be open to letting them fail fast and all that, becomes more valid if there is a demonstrable example in one team whereby you can show, hey, look at this, we have about 80 repos that we maintain, and we have about 60 check-ins that have gone in with pull requests. Of this, only 10 are actually good. The others have all failed, which is okay, but what we want to do is to see those failures slowly reduce next time and help these team members get past that hump. Show by example has been a technique that I have used. I'm not saying that's the only recipe of success, but it has to start somewhere. Someone has to demonstrate that and be able to say, we can fall down and we will help you when you fall down, and collectively we will learn as well as someone falls down. Both the person who is actually demonstrating the technique also has something there to learn. Can you let them fall soft? So it's a cultural aspect of knowing where to find that right balance of providing that cushion to the teams to know that they are safe at the end of the day. Did I answer the question, Tracy?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So this is something that I had to write a paper on recently when I tested for my one black stripe, and this comes directly from my martial arts Kung Nu, where they have those three principles: open minds, open hearts, and open arms, right? And that principle is what they let you imbibe, and they truly think of a black belt to be a person who has just gone back to the drawing board and learning the ABCs from scratch. To Tracy's question, having an open mind and an open heart first, and a culture of warmth within the team leads to creativity, leads to the aspect of I'm safe and I can experiment, which then leads to your culture getting stronger, which eventually leads to a culture of innovation and rapid experimentation. These three aspects of open mind, hearts, and arms resonate to me a lot. And I try to show that by example to my upper management and to the team that I manage. And quite frankly and honestly, that attitude has actually helped me learn a lot today. More so than being a leader. I have been actually quite frankly, the last 3 years has been a white belt journey for me. So this transformation culturally has to happen within each team, within each person, and this is not something that wishfully or granted somebody from top down can pass and say, all right, from tomorrow we are all going to have open minds and hearts, and everybody who's from solutions architects to tech leads are going to go and teach and train, and they're going to actually get everybody towards one level of maturity. It doesn't happen that way. Demonstrating a culture of continuous improvement from a small area and then just permeating that is the only way of true success by example. Some anti-patterns. So now let's talk about some key anti-patterns that at least are followed on the dojo that are relevant to the IT industry as well. Disregard for health and wellness of your dojo as well as people in the dojo. What that means is you don't want to practice something until a point where your bones are broken and you're out of commission for like a year. You want to know your strengths, you want to know your weaknesses, you want to know your culture, and you want to actually slowly imbibe a culture of learning and culture of improvement. Where I go about doing this, this sort of a statement resonates is when you have a dojo that has a mix of 4 black belts, 7 green belts, and let's say 20 white belts, and you can compare and contrast that to a dojo that has like 17 black belts, a few brown belts, and maybe 5 white belts, the dynamics is going to be very different. And the approach that you take is also going to be very different. At the end of the day, if we keep in mind that an organization entirety is a dojo and our vendor partners, our associates, our third-party clienteles who are also part of the entire IT industry are all one cohesive unit, one has to consider that when they make a top-down push on certain changes in the DevOps practices. I'll give you an example. We, as in Markel, we went from a huge phase where we made changes to who our vendor partners were for the cloud. We had IBM, we had Microsoft Azure. That caused a lot of dip. If you go back to my previous slides, there is a big dip in our graph, and we realized that switching vendor partners and just signing a contract and putting that through could have a detrimental effort, or could have a really good effect on how your culture transforms right after that. Often, at least in Markel, we have seen where associates have gone or taken a dip in their cultural practices as these churns happen. So it's very important for a large organization or a medium organization to think about everyone in the dojo, including your vendors, your associates, and your customers all in one unison, to think about what measures or changes you do from the top that could actually help in your change transformation versus the other way. Lack of a discipline and a humility and self-control. This is not just from the sensei, senpai, or uke perspective, or a top-down leader perspective, but this also goes from a bottom-up perspective. You want to actually foster a culture, and you want to actually look at hiring and look at new associates coming in who would actually help with this discipline, would have the self-control to practice it. And if they don't, there is some level of teaching and there's some level of mentoring that needs to be given back to the community to then take this forward. Otherwise, what happens is there can be times when you get through to a loss of sight of where your mission is and where your values are, and that actually causes a large-scale impact. For 6 to 7 months, we saw a huge dip in deployments and test engineering practices with that one change in one division. And I could only fathom if somebody were to actually make a holistic change, how much of that would be an impact seen in a large organization all across. So never let loss of your structure, your sight of where your mission is and values, because that finally impacts your ultimate culture. Innovation is something that I have seen so many people start to use and say, hey, we need to innovate. We will time box innovation, or we will give some time period in each of the iterations in Agile to say the team shall have 15 to 20% efforts on innovation and so on and so forth. Here is my personal take on it, and it's just a philosophical take. If I have to innovate in the martial arts that I learned for the last 11 years, and I want to innovate on a technique that's like a block or something, I have to have had a mastery to a certain extent. I have to have practiced it so much that my mind starts to go, how about if I change this pattern a bit? How about if I include this extra movement into this particular practice that I've been doing for a long time? That is the only key to innovation and experimentation, in my opinion. If I fundamentally lack that open mind, or if I don't have that practice discipline behind my back to help me fathom what I could innovate as the next level, innovation becomes truly a buzzword. And even if all of the agile teams and your IT workforce is dedicated innovation planned in their cycles and stuff like that, it would only take you so far and so much in your journey. I'll stop right here. Any questions on the Antipatterns?
On the innovation front, how does Markel handle open source? Are developers and like folks on your team encouraged to contribute, or are you just consumers of the open source world?
Very good question. So far, we have been 90% consumers of the open source world, and we have changed the culture from largely Microsoft products through to open source culture. Our next journey, hopefully as we mature out through to that black belt journey, is to have contributions coming back from the team. So to foster that practice, what we went on and started to do, we open sourced our shared library within Markel. not open source it to the outside world. And we started to let teams consume that set of code base and start to replicate and foster that. Simple things like cloned blueprints on test engineering, frameworks for unit testing, for all these languages that are open source that we brought in from outside. We have let the teams consume them and start to put their own structural changes and pull it back for pull requests that we would then make it as part of the shared library, collected shared library in Markel. We hope that in the near future, we open that out to the real world as well, where if we get, let's say, a SOX compliant report feature going out for test pipelines, something that can be given to other SOX compliant organizations that use open source tool to actually lever those features. We are not there yet. From a fostering the open source mentality, we have put in tools to let our security folks be able to have a unique pattern of bringing it in, cleansing it, looking at what is needed, and my team acts as a conduit for bringing those in for app dev teams. And we hope that in the future, we turnkey and start to see contributions from within Markel app dev teams to the outside world. Any other questions? All right, so life lessons that at least I have started to get an epiphany on, and I feel is applicable to the IT industry, is can be categorized into 3 segments. One is you want your top leadership all the way from the top to the bottom, east and west, north and south, to slowly start to think about themselves as white belts or uke, which internally means you're there to learn and you're there to have a learning mentality, and that actually fosters a better culture of safety. Without this mentality demonstrated from the top down, there's only so much your bottom up culture can go up and influence a change. So I have taken that as a personal goal of mine to start to think about anything. For example, a Helm deployment that comes through and we have not seen something like that in the fintech industry, and we are going, oh, how do we ensure that we have our backs and access controls to suffice for SOX 4 reporting? We don't know that. Having a white belt mentality, going and approaching an app dev team, or even going into a meeting or a challenge as, hey, I'm here to actually learn, and I'm not here to come and basically say, sure, I have CI/CD pipelines, and you're here to actually, start using the CI/CD pipelines, but basically stepping back and saying, I'm here to learn what the challenges are, and can we actually overcome this challenge with some of the DevOps patterns and practices is the key, is the number 1 key. And that has helped us a lot in actually transforming some of our minds from the top as well. Constant practice of teaching and constant practices from within your own team is absolutely critical. Just because a central team is called a safe systems team, or a central team for a division is a DevOps team, does not mean or guarantee that they shall only be teaching others how to do certain things and it's the others who will have to practice. No, it actually comes from within as well. Every person in every team has to be slowly transformed to that culture of practice and giving back at the same time. One major retrospect that we had as in my own team a year back was, when do we start practicing and when do we start teaching, right? There is this fear that people start to say, sure, I practice build and deployments each time I make a slight change, and I practice test-driven development, and I push out only well-tested code. Well, should I wait until I understand the entire plethora of the industry to then go and teach another person? Or can I start teaching even when I had this mastery just a couple of days back? So we have opened out what is called, we need to learn and we need to teach each other, no matter what role they are in and no matter what level they are in their organization. And that goes all the way from a director through to the junior most developer in my team. And we help teach each other, and that's how we improve. And I believe, this is again a philosophical belief, is that experimentation and innovation only improves through that constant practice and teaching attitude. And when that happens, it truly drives a culture or truly changes your mind to start being a servant leadership. And you start to think about change being driven at all levels, all the way from top down, all the way from even junior engineers from each team to the other. Somebody is saying, hey, have you checked out this Azure CLI that now has a new feature where if you combine that with Terraform, oh my God, you can do so much goodies, or vice versa. Hey, look, check out this cool way that I have wrapped up containers, and I've actually had versioning, semantic versioning applied onto the Docker images. And you want those sort of stuff to be taught between teams and not just say, hey, this is going to be one team or the other. And that truly changes everyone in your organization. It flattens the level out, and it calls for a culture of servant leadership is wrong word, servant teacher and servant mentor and servant student, which gets your organization at a very high satisfaction rate. And as culture improves, I believe that your performance improves. I also feel like your predictability of great changes and features out will improve as well. Questions here? So what I wanted to actually do before I take more questions and walk through some of the other deck if needed is a big shout out. And thanks to all my dojos that have given me a learning opportunity to come in, learn, and also teach and get better as a person, as an engineer, as a developer. And I also want to thank my team who has been my true sensei in all of this. So with that, I'll stop and take some questions.
So there wasn't much. How did production teams embrace this? I have seen continuous delivery be pretty successful up to the testing. How did we break down? Did you break down the walls and bring in the production side of the house?
Sure. So I'll go back to this slide here. We started this technique of everything as code. So we figured out that largely up until UAT environment, things were automated, but then UAT and prod, there were cycles of 2 weeks of manual testing. And there was this black box of, we don't know quite what is tested and we're not sure, and the business unit does it. So what we did was we took a chapter out of the everything as code and we completely consolidated test rail, quality center. We had Hank as another tool, all the paid test management tools out, and we asked all of the manual testing teams and app dev teams analysts who do manual testing and UAT users who do manual testing to start storing their scenarios in Git. So that was our first forte into understanding what does a team do in terms of manual testing. It was also helpful in actually getting them to have the scenarios documented in Git, which then we were able to then go, these scenarios could easily be automated. Let's get you a framework to start turning these scenarios into an automated way. So we have pipelines today in our Jenkins farm that allows for a team to start from the basic foundation of manual testing, and we don't force them to do automated, testing right from day one. We start to interface with them and say, this is a pipeline where if you start checking this test scenarios along with your code repository in this sort of a fixture, we would be able to let you take the goodies of running a manual pipeline that would run and export out results and get you a PDF that says, here is all the test results and pass and fail. What it gives us an insight is traceability and also encapsulating all your test engineering efforts along with your build and deployment code base. So that's your first step. So we started doing that about 1.5 years back. And as and when we saw more and more scenarios in the manual repository being added, we started to interface and started to give them frameworks in various languages, mostly BDD languages, to get them into an automated way. We have Pester, SpecFlow, Cucumber Node.js, Cucumber Java, Cucumber Ruby, TerraTest. All these BDD frameworks are today active and in use in Markel in various stages of their maturity. The production tests were highly manual as the next stage. We started to introduce API. One API test a day in production will keep your app health pretty well and your doctor away, sort of a principle. So we went through with that schema and that program, and we started to encourage teams to have at least one test of their API in prod that would not do any data manipulation, but just check their site reliability matrices on their APIs. So as the team started to actually have one repeatable test in their production, they started to want more. And that drove an explosion of their tests all the way from prod through the lower environments as well. It wasn't a simple, 2-week or a 2-month activity. We had to slowly nudge them along their way from a manual pattern through to an automated approach. We use tags in our pipelines. We let the teams tag scenarios for layers. So a typical look at Git repository in Markel on teams that follow it, we'll see scenarios tagged as at QA, pre-prod, prod, and we use those tags checked into Git to basically say these test scenarios need to be orchestrated in these environments, and that's largely the same process even in the manual testing side. We let them decorate in Git tags and let them control the pipelines. Thereby, they get used to a continuous integration technique, even though they are actually going in and saving and editing scenarios in Git. It also gives them a practice of repeating Git and slowly getting them into that pattern as well. Good question.
So we are at the hour. If any other potential questions for Guru, this has been great. Actually, I'd love to kind of have some insight into how large organizations really embrace this process, and I think that your analogy with a dojo has been pretty fabulous.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for the opportunity.
And everybody, I will be, this will be recorded. This has been recorded. I will be putting it up in the CD Foundation's online meetup, so you can use it and share it with your teams there. And we will see everybody. I don't think we have one scheduled for December. I may be wrong, but we do have one scheduled for January, and it is going to be on the Agile mindset. So it's a good follow-up actually to this presentation. Okay, everybody, stay safe out there. We appreciate your attendance, and we will see you next time at the CD Foundation online meetup.